May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our heart be pleasing to you, O Lord. Well, it's probably no secret that today's topic is really prayer. The Lord asks us to ask and to be bold about it as well. If we go back to our catechism days, we see that Luther says about the Lord's Prayer that God tenderly invites us to call on Him as dear children ask of their own Father. Kind of a nice way to think about it, isn't it? But then Luther also insisted that he could get nothing done during the day if he didn't start out with hours of prayer. Hours of prayer. I fail there, I will admit. Hours, no. Minutes, I struggle sometimes. I'll be honest. But I think one of the best little quotes of Luther is that he wished that he could pray like his dog watched him eat sausage. Now, if you're a dog lover, you know that there is undivided attention as you're eating. That dog is focused on you. And I wish I could pray like that as well. I think we all do, don't we? I mean, I have the attention span of a gnat, so it's really difficult for me to focus on anything for a long period of time. But we say it's a great idea to pray, don't we? And it's something we should be doing. But if we're not doing it, what does that say about us? I mean, if we're Christians, don't we really want to be praying all the time? And if we're not praying, does that say that maybe there's some deep spiritual sickness in us? Something that we need to get around, to cure, to look to the Lord for help with? I think it would mean that, wouldn't it? So I was looking at a long list of things, of reasons why people would not pray. And I think you'll find there's an interesting parallel to why we don't read our Bibles as well. Maybe it's a failure of habit. We just don't have a habit established to do it on a daily basis at a specific time. I like to get up early in the morning and read because it forces me to do it the same time every day, and I know that is a task I need to achieve. So maybe we never formed a really good habit of praying. And we are creatures of habit. Maybe it's some kind of strange misbelief we have about prayer. Like we can't really talk directly to God for some reason. Some fundamental misconception of ours. Or of anyone, actually. Maybe. Maybe we're just lazy. We just don't want to devote the time to it. Could be. A failure of will, like my dieting efforts. A failure of will. When I'm home for a week off the road, I actually eat worse than I do than when I'm on the road because there's all the goodies around the house and I have no will to avoid them. But maybe that's our problem. We just don't have the will to sit down and do it. What about doubt? Doubt seems to be a big thing in a lot of people's lives. Maybe we doubt that God really is listening. Maybe we doubt He really can do something. Well, it's possible. I particularly like this one reason. Oh, I tried it. Didn't get an answer. Didn't hear what I wanted to hear. Didn't get the goodies I asked for. It doesn't work. Well, I think that kind of goes back to being lazy. But whatever. What about the public and flowery prayers that you hear, especially in church? I need to be able to do that, and I can't do it. God never asked us to do that, did he? He never asks us to pray like that. He just asks us to talk to him. It doesn't have to be anything flowery. It doesn't have to be anything with big $10 words in it. It just needs to be an honest conversation. Or I could say I'm just too busy. Too much packed into the day. Can't make time for it. This one I think kind of hits home a little bit. I think some people are really afraid of God. I think people won't even come into a church because they're afraid the roof's going to fall on them because they've been such bad people. You know anyone like that? I've known people like that. Obviously, that's not the case because those people need to come here. They need to hear the hope, the forgiveness that Jesus offers them. Maybe, and I can tell you this from my own family's experience, it just wasn't modeled to do that. My parents were not churchgoers. They would send us off to church, head off to Sunday school, but they didn't go. Later in life, I found out my father was a much stronger believer than I ever thought, but they didn't go to church. So they didn't model prayer at home either, which I found out, maybe you really need to see that. I think kids need to see examples of what has to be done or what should be done. Otherwise, they'll never pick up that habit either. Maybe we just don't know God very well. Maybe we think he's some far-off person, just kind of watching things, not really getting involved with us on a personal basis or in a way that we would feel is helpful to us. That would be a deist, wouldn't it? You just think there's a God out there, but he's not a personal God. He's just some creator that stands out there and watches what goes on. Maybe that's why some people don't pray. Maybe. Or maybe this is part of the problem too. We don't dig into the scriptures enough to feel like we know God well enough to pray to him. That's a possibility too. And as you know, there are as many excuses in the world as you can possibly make not to do something. All of us are great procrastinators, aren't we? We can rationalize anything to get out of doing anything. But many of us have heard a little formula to prayer called ACTS. Many of you learned it when you were in confirmation. A is for adoration. Start out with adoring the God that we really love and know. And C, confess our brokenness to him. And then T, give thanksgiving for something very specific that he's done for you. How does that helps you build that personal relationship? And then S, supplication, where you would ask for what you really want to pray for after you've adored him, confessed your brokenness, and given thanksgiving. I'm not big with formulas, but it works for a lot of people. So if it works for you, that's awesome. But what is prayer really? Prayer is communications, isn't it? Isn't it a communication between us and God? Between us and Jesus and the Holy Spirit? How good of a relationship can you have if you don't communicate? How many marriages survive when neither one talks to the other? I don't know of any, to be honest. You have to talk to people. You have to talk to your God. You have to communicate with him. And he's just waiting to hear from you. Too often we hear things about, if you want to be blessed, you got to pray. okay? Or the family that prays together stays together. Well, yeah, those may be real things, but I don't think that should be our motivation to pray to our God. I think our motivation should be that we really want to have a relationship with him, that we really have faith that he's there to help us. Isn't that really what the communication should be? What the relationship should be? I think it is. Did you ever think of prayer being a privilege? Wow. You got your driver's license. The state tells you that your driver's license is a privilege. You don't necessarily have a right to have it. Well, we don't necessarily have a right to talk to God, but you know what? He does want to talk to us. We have a privilege that he is willing to listen to us. And he's just waiting there for us. Why would we not take advantage of that? What a beautiful blessing. Sometimes we just have a motivation that we want to pray because we think it's the right thing. Well, that's probably not the best motivation, just because it's the right thing. Really, the right thing is that it's a privilege to talk to God. And it's a privilege to hear his response. Even when we don't like it. Even when it's no or wait. Now, here's another thought for you that you maybe have not really given much credence to or even given it a thought about. Prayer actually flows out of baptism. Do you ever think about that? Now, I'm not saying that someone who is an unbeliever can't pray to God, because there's plenty of examples of that in the Bible where unbelievers approached God for guidance and for help. But what I am saying is, if you are baptized, aren't you special to God? Aren't you his child, his heir? How many parents can tune out their own child asking for something, but readily tune out all the other children? Ever have that experience? You hear mom, but you know, what? Wait a minute, that one's mine. That one I need to listen to. We do that as parents, don't we? We put ours first. God does that too. He has wrapped us in baptism. He has sent his son to die for us and to care for us. Of course he's going to give us that promise that he is going to listen. I'll let you chew on that for a while. But you know, God really delights in hearing our prayers. He's there. We hear it all throughout the Bible. We even, if you really want to put that formula of Acts together, look at some of the prayers of the kings in the Old Testament. They follow that pattern. They adore him, and then they confess and give thanksgiving, and then they ask for what they need. That's a pattern that already exists in the Bible. And I think that's why it works for so many people. It's proven. But in that, I want you to notice that in our Old Testament reading, the boldness of Abraham to ask for what he wanted. God thinks that we should be bold in what we ask. Why should we, ask for some trivial thing when what we really need is some bold request of him? Now, to us, to our culture, what we read there with Abraham seems kind of out of place and maybe awfully bold on his part, stepping on the toes of God, so to speak. But in ancient times, a servant of a king would actually approach the questioning of the king in the same manner. So to the ancient culture, this story makes perfect sense, how Abraham approaches God. We should be able to do the same thing. I'm not saying negotiate with God, but I'm saying be bold in what you ask for. You know, I could have been in high school, asked for a flashy convertible, and promised to take other kids to Sunday school as a negotiation tactic, but I don't think it was going to work. So don't try to negotiate with God. Just know that he is willing to listen to your request, no matter how bold it seems to you. And in closing, I just want to talk a little bit about prayer being a relationship of faith. You know, I went back, I mentioned that maybe people who don't pray, who say they are Christians, have some deep spiritual problem or issue that they need to deal with. But think about it. If you really have trust and faith in your Lord, wouldn't you pray? Wouldn't you try to talk to him at every opportunity? Of course you would. That's the whole faith relationship that goes on between us and him. Don't abandon that. He's there to help. He's there to listen. He sacrificed his own son so that we would be there with him. Don't be afraid to ask, to seek, or to knock. In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, amen.